In this video, I'm going to break down and show you how you can recreate some cool video editing effects from NFL videos in Adobe Premiere Pro. Hey, what's going on? My name is Sarellas. I'm a videographer and editor from Toronto, Canada. I specialize in sport videography. And recently on the channel, I did a video where I reacted to some really cool NFL edits that I found on Instagram. And in today's video, I actually want to dive deeper into some of those videos, show you some effects, break down how those effects are actually done, and then show you how you can recreate the effects from these cool NFL video edits done by people who are like seasoned in the industry and do a lot of cool work for yourself here in Adobe Premiere Pro. So here's the first clip that we have in Premiere Pro. It's a video from the Bills, and we're going to recreate that transition you just saw there. There it is again. And when you actually look at the transition, it's quite simple. It's essentially this one clip, and then the clip reverses very quickly and crossfades into the next clip. And you can see the transition again here if we go frame by frame. This clip, the receiver is going down, and then he comes back up, the clip reverses and goes into the next one. And they actually didn't use the crossfade on that one. But that's the gist of the effect. So we're going to be doing that same effect with some clips that I've pulled here from my work with the Canadian Football League. So we have this one passing clip here that we're going to use. And then we have this clip of a receiver running in and scoring a touchdown and his ensuing celebration. So we're going to use those clips to do a similar type of effect. All right, so here's the first clip we have. Let's find a place where we want to start this clip, ideally after the snap, maybe like here. Probably closer to like here since the quarterback holds the ball for a while. Yeah, that's good. And then we go to there. So let's take this bit right here and put that ball traveling in slow motion. And maybe we go to like here, and then we'll do that reverse effect. So we want to first make this clip slow motion. So let's right click, show clip keyframes, time remaining, and speed. By the way, if you like the color grade on any of these clips, they're all done using my football video LUT pack, which I use to color all of my football videos. It's on my website, so you can go check it out. There'll be a link in the description for that. But anyways, let's first go to our speed properties now that we have them up. And we're just going to hold Command and right click. And that's going to give us like this ramp thing that we can kind of pull. So we want to like speed ramp this in at some point. Maybe we want it to be slow motion up until like here when the guy's about to catch the ball. So let's just like bring this over to here, and then we'll pull this side, which is before the catch, down to 40%. There. I'm just going to actually ditch the audio on this. So let's just disable it. We'll worry about audio later, but I really want to focus on creating the visuals here. So we have this slow motion shot, and then it goes into here. And then maybe we slow it down again right here. So let's right click and drag out again and slow this down to 40% since this clip is shot in 60 frames per second. Maybe shorten that up a little bit as well. So we've got slow motion, we kind of speed ramp into the catch, and then we go down. So we have our clip here going in the right direction, but now let's make our clip go in reverse. So we're going to hold Option and drag to create a duplicate copy. And that's just going to give us this clip again, but over here. And now we want to adjust any speed parameters on this clip before we reverse it. Otherwise, working in reverse with speed and duration gets a little bit messy if you haven't nested the clip. So I know that I want this clip to reverse very quickly. So this part here that we have in slow motion as we're going to the ground, we want to lift that up and bring it back to regular speed, just like that at 100%. And now we're going to go Command R, and we'll change the speed to -200, which is going to make the clip go in reverse and make it twice as fast as it currently is. So we'll click Enter, and then we put those clips back to back. And now we have this shot where the player catches the ball, he goes to the ground, and then he reverses really quickly. And obviously we're going to add a crossfade and a transition there. So let's just cut this clip right here. And I actually want to show you the potential pitfall before we move on. So if you drag this clip up to create a copy, and then you reverse it, so we'll go -200 and double the speed, and then you try to make more adjustments to these like keyframes here, like see how if I go like this, it'll jump me to like a different spot in the clip, and it's really messy to work with and not very intuitive, at least in my opinion. So I wouldn't recommend doing it like that. Try to make all your speed adjustments before you reverse the clip, and then if you want to make further speed adjustments after you reverse a clip, just nest it and then make your speed adjustments. So now the next clip we want to transition into is this receiver here running. So let's kind of start that like when we have them framed up pretty well, probably like right here type of thing. And again, I'm just going to ditch the audio for the time being. So here we have the receiver running, and that's kind of a good spot to stop that clip. So let's move this all over to the side. So we have this clip reversing, and then we have the next clip. But obviously we have to speed ramp into this clip as well to kind of make it make sense. So let's hold Command and left click, and then drag this out so we get a ramp. And then we'll just turn the speed way up, maybe to like, I don't know, 400%. Just make it fast. That works, but this is all just too long. So maybe we just make this minus 300, make it a little faster. And we like bring this down here. So this is also a little bit faster and just doesn't take as long. That right there, if we shorten that up, isn't bad. Now let's add our crossfade. Now I added that crossfade by just highlighting both clips and clicking Shift D to add my default video transition, which is set to cross dissolve. But if your default video transition is not set to cross dissolve, then you can come to the effects panel here and just write cross dissolve, and that will let you grab this effect, drag it down, and then you can kind of zoom in. And once you get this like half box thing that's colored in red, you can just drag the ends wherever you want, and that'll give you this cross effect. And that looks like that, which is pretty similar to what we were working with in that builds video. So now we have this transition here into this one right here. And that needs to be reversed, so let's just cut it where we want to reverse it. So now we created a copy of just this end of the clip here, and we'll hit Command R. And just go, I don't know, minus 250. And shorten that up a little bit there. And I can just transition us right into the next clip. Now that is obviously far too long, so let's shorten that up a lot. That's good. And now right at this part where these guys come in the air and kind of like hit, I want to make it slow motion. So let's see what our frame rate is. We're working with a 60 frame per second clip. So we'll drag out this speed ramp and kind of bring this down to 40%. Right there. That's fine. And now let's drag this up. We'll take just the ending bit, make it a little bit faster, and reverse it by 250%. Maybe cut some of the end off both ways here. Just like that type of thing. And that's basically the effect. I think one thing that would be fun to add to this effect is if you grab an adjustment layer and put it over top of your transition bit right here. So you can see we transition from one clip to the other right here. I'll put a marker down so we know. I think it would be fun to add like a little bit of like a white flash type of thing, like a brightness and contrast change to place a little bit of emphasis on the transition. So I just counted 7 frames to either side by holding Shift and the right arrow and then just clicking the right arrow twice to jump 7 frames. So we'll do that again. Shift and left arrow to jump 5, and then left arrow to jump 6, 7, and we're adding cuts to cut this adjustment layer down. And then we're going to add the brightness and contrast effect under color correction in your effects panel. And we're going to add a keyframe in the very middle here for the brightness and the contrast. We'll drag it to one side, and then we'll do another keyframe in the middle and drag it to the other side. And now that we've enabled keyframes by clicking the stopwatch here, we can adjust the brightness and contrast values to create like a white flash type of thing that's going to kind of add to this transition. So let's bring our brightness value up and just crank the contrast as well. Maybe not that bright. Something like that. You're going to have to play with your own footage to get like something that you like that's like kind of stylized and fun. But now when we play that speed ramp transition back, we have a flash and a speed ramp, which I think does more for us than just the speed ramp itself. And if we add in the cross dissolve here that we've been using and drag it out a little bit, now we have all 3 of those effects, and it gives us something like this. And I think that's pretty good and pretty similar to what the builds were doing as well. Obviously, you'll have to add your own like style to this, and the type of footage you're using and the way you color grade it is going to make a big difference. But that's essentially what the effect is that they're doing. So the next effect that we have is from the LA Chargers, and they basically did this edit where they do lots of zoom ins with lots of motion blur, a few flashes, and a little bit of an RGB glitch as you're seeing on the screen right now. And I'm going to show you how you can create this pretty simply, only using Premiere Pro, not having to go into After Effects at all. So I've pulled a few clips here myself, and we're going to kind of do like some like push in, motion blur, zoom type of transitions on all these clips and make them come together kind of as a sequence. They're not really related clips, but this is just for like tutorial and education purposes. So let's pick a part of this first clip here that we like, that we kind of want to like slow down and do a cool push in on. I kind of like it when the player's walking at the camera like that right there. So let's just take this segment. By the way, when I'm cutting these clips, I'm using Q and W to do like a ripple delete type of thing. So if you come to a certain section and hit Q, it'll delete everything to the left of the cursor, like that. And if you go to a certain section and hit W, it'll delete everything to the right of the cursor, like that. So let's see what frame rate we've shot this clip in. I'm pretty sure it's 60 frames per second. And yes, it is 60 frames per second. So again, I think I'm just going to ditch all the audio on all of this, just for simplicity's sake. And let's slow this clip down to 40%. We want this to be a fairly fast edit, so let's just go like that. Frame it a little bit more towards the middle, like there. And let's actually add a position keyframe here, and another one here to keep the player centered the whole time. Yeah, that's better. And let's actually highlight these, right click, and we'll ease in, and we'll also ease out so that the movement between those two keyframes that keep the player centered is a little bit smoother. That looks pretty good. So now we're going to grab the transform effect, and this is what we're going to use to do our push-ins because it allows us to add motion blur to our clips. So let's uncheck use composition shutter angle and crank the motion blur all the way to 360 degrees. The higher this number, the more motion blur you're going to have. It relates to like shutter angle, if you understand how shutter angle works on cinema cameras. Higher shutter angle, more motion blur. 180 degrees is natural. For like these stylized type of effects, I just like cranking it to 360, but that's a personal choice. So then we're going to click on the keyframe here to toggle the animation for scale, and we'll put that first keyframe where we're at 100% scale right at the very start. Then let's come to the end of the clip here, and we want to zoom in so that we have a fairly noticeable, So I forgot to do something, and I'm going to explain it right now, and then we'll go back and fix it. So because this clip is shot 16:9 and it's not particularly centered, since I've done these animations up here to keep the player in the middle, when I scaled, it scaled back towards the middle of the clip, which is not in the middle of our frame right now because the clip has edges that aren't being shown since it's in 16:9. You can see if I go like this, like there's more clip than what we have. So what we should actually do is let's get rid of this transform effect. So Command and X just to cut it. And then we're going to nest this clip. And now there's no like other parts of this clip on the side. Everything that wasn't showing just got removed. So now the middle of this clip actually is the middle of what we're seeing in our frame here. So if we go Command V and put that transform effect back on, now when I scale in, we go right to the middle, which is what we want. So there we go. Quick little tip for us, I guess. And let's right click and go ease in and ease out. And we'll put this new keyframe that has 130 scale at the end so that we're going to get like a nice push in the entire time. Well, you don't really see the motion blur because the push in is happening over too long of a period of time. You can see if I like really shorten it up like that type of thing, now you're really going to see the motion blur like pretty substantially on this clip. So there you can like really see how much motion blur there is. But that's not really what we want to do right now. We're going to get to that though. So we zoom in and then we stop and hold for a second. I like that. And then let's take this clip and we're going to do something very similar. So let's center them up. I kind of like where this is. So let's nest this clip as we learned we should be doing. And then we'll add the transform effect. And we're going to go scale, add a keyframe, crank the shutter angle, and then let's bring this up to like 130 again. And right click, ease in, ease out. So that's going to give us a zoom in there, a zoom in there. And now we want to actually do a zoom transition. So let's go just a few frames from the end here, so maybe 5 frames from the end. And we're going to add another keyframe, and then we're going to go forward and really crank this to just like a lot and pull it to the end. So now that gives us like that zoom in effect. And we can adjust the timing on this by clicking this arrow here next to scale and kind of like pulling the keyframes out a little bit. Let's make sure we click ease in and ease out on both of them. And then you can just grab these handles and pull them to kind of like change the animation curve to zoom in how you want. So I usually like pulling both handles in a little bit to like further ease the animation, I guess. And then we're going to make this into a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frame animation. So put that right there. And now we have this clip that zooms in a little bit and then does like a big zoom type of thing. And I actually think that I don't want to see this last frame where you can see like the motion blur goes away and the clip stops. So maybe like move this back a couple frames. And then right here before we have to get to this final keyframe, we're just going to cut this clip off. And that's going to give us that zoom. But you can see on the last frame here, we still have lots of motion blur, and that's going to help us transition really well into our next clip. So let's grab our next clip here, which is this clip, which is already in slow motion, 120 frames per second. And again, I'm going to just animate this so that we're following along with the player, since he's not always in the center of the frame, and we're working with a 4:5 timeline here. So we're just going to go along and keep tweaking the position as we see fit. And that's about good. Now let's highlight all these keyframes. Right click, ease out, ease in. Good. So now as we go through here, you can see that we kind of keep this guy in the center the entire time. Everything looks smooth to me. So let's right click, nest this. We know it's in 120 frames per second already in S&Q, so it's reading as 23.976 frames per second, but playing back in 120 frames per second slow motion. So let's speed this up to 500%, since that's going to get us back to regular speed here. But we're going to add another transform effect, just like we did before. We'll crank that shutter angle, and then we're going to keyframe the scale, and then we're going to go forward a couple keyframes, and we'll bring it up again to, yeah, let's say about there. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to ease in on that first keyframe. I'm not going to bother easing out of this first keyframe we have here. As long as we've eased into the one that we finish on, I'm not too worried about it, because we're actually going to cut a couple of frames off to make sure that we don't have that thing where we start without motion blur in our frame. We want to make sure that there's motion blur the entire time. So let's cut this clip off. Maybe we'll just zoom in here, move these keyframes back. And let's cut this clip off like there type of thing, so that we can just have that zoom in that already starts with motion blur. And now that gives us that type of zoom, where you can see we go through, we zoom, and then we finish zooming there, and there's still a little bit of motion blur. I actually think that that should be a little bit more pronounced. So let's scale this below 100. And then by the time we get to like there, we're at 100. So we can cut this off. I think that's going to even look a little bit better to make the zoom more pronounced. Yeah, I like that a lot more. So now we do like a full zoom like that. But in the video with the chargers, what they're doing with every zoom is they're adding either a white flash or a like RGB glitch effect. So if you want to add that white flash, you can just add like an additive dissolve type of effect. So we throw an additive dissolve there, and then maybe we add a cut here and throw another additive dissolve in. And that's going to kind of give us this flash that goes along with our zoom. We can even put the additive dissolve over top of these two clips since we cut a little bit off, and it'll give us like a small crossfade with a flash at the same time. So there's our flash and our zoom. Now that Charges video was doing a lot of speed ramping, and I haven't shown you a ton of speed ramping in this, but let's actually take this clip right here when this player goes flying in the air and speed ramp it down to the 120 frames per second slow motion that we filmed this clip in. So I've already sped it up to 500%. So let's go right click, show keyframes, time remaining, and speed, which we've got enabled. And then we're going to hold command and right click here, drag out a little ramp. And then we'll go to the end where we want this to like not be slow motion, drag out another ramp. And this is already at 100%, you can see here. So let's drag it down to 20% because we've sped this clip up from 100 to 500 by using Command R. So we're going to bring it down 5 times to get back to that regular slow motion that we were already using. He's in the air, and then he zooms off. It's glitching a little bit because it's just a lot for my timeline to play back. Maybe I'll drop the resolution. There we go. We finally got to play back once. All right, now I want to add a zoom in effect while we have this speed ramp happening. It's a little bit weird though, because once you've done some speed ramping and stuff and like time remapping, it's a little bit tricky using transform effects. They sometimes just don't respond. I think it's like a Premiere Pro thing. So we're gonna have to cut this clip like a little bit before we want to. We'll create a copy of it, and then we're just gonna nest that copy. And now that we've nested it, Premiere's not gonna like recognize all the time remapping we've done on this clip, and we can just add a transform effect and do another zoom transition like we had already practiced. So let's crank our shutter angle to 360, and then we're gonna add one scale keyframe, go forward a little bit, crank that in, and let's again reduce this like below 100 so we can get to like, there we're at 102 right there. So let's cut that off. We can probably zoom that in even more actually, just to get a greater blur since we're using it as a transition anyways. And we don't want to ease into that. We want to just keep going. So we're going to cut that like right there. And that's going to be our zoom transition, a nice fast one. So let's do the end of our zoom transition again, just for good practice. So we've got our clip there. It's not perfectly centered actually. Maybe like right there we add a keyframe, and then right there we add one, then bring that back there. There we go, that clip's kind of like proper now. So let's nest this. And now we'll grab the transform effect, uncheck use composition shutter angle, crank the shutter angle up. Let's keyframe the scale, bring it down to like about there is fine. Then we're going to come forward a bit, maybe like to here. Crank it up, and let's right click on the second keyframe and ease into it. We can again pull that to create a little bit of a different Bezier. And that'll give us a nice little zoom in. We just need to cut this one frame off here. And there's our little zoom in effect. Now, the last zoom effect we did, we added a flash transition. This one, we're gonna add a RGB glitch transition. So let's grab our adjustment layer and put it over approximately where this transition is. So this is kind of where this transition starts, and this is where it ends. So let's put a cut there with Command K, and let's search for the VR chromatic aberration effect. So VR chromatic aberrations, drag that in. And you can see already that gives us like this default, like little RGB effect. I think it's a little bit strong for what we want here. So let's turn this to like, I don't know, -3 and 3 on the red and the blue aberration, add keyframes for that, and put it just like a little bit in. Yeah, 2 frames in, I think that works. Maybe a little more, -5 and 5. And then 0 those out at the start. Copy these -5 and 5 keyframes. Let's go to the end, go 1, 2, and paste those right there. So copy, paste, with Command C and Command V, of course. And then we'll come to the very last frame here where we have our adjustment layer, and we're going to zero out the red aberration and the blue aberration once again. And that's going to give us this effect where we go through and we get like a little bit of chromatic aberration happening as we zoom. So if you turn it off, you can see it's gone, and then it's in. And it kind of continues to here. You can still see it. And then it disappears. And you can make this as strong or as weak as you want, but I like being a little bit more subtle with it. So I think that's kind of a nice way to do it. So at the end of it, this is what that little zoom sequence, I guess, looks like. A little bit of handheld looking stuff, some zooms with some flashes, some zooms with some glitches, and just a bit of speed ramping. So that's how to recreate those 2 specific effects from NFL videos online. A lot of it is just like cool speed ramping and flashes and glitches and things that just catch your attention. It's a really trendy way to edit videos nowadays, especially in sports. I find myself actually doing it a lot, even though some of it is a little cliche, I guess. But either way, I think it's a lot of fun. And if you had a lot of fun, then feel free to hit the subscribe button, because I post videography and video editing tips and tutorials similar to this one on a regular basis, and I would love to have you around for that. If you have any questions about anything that we talked about here today, or just like how I did anything, maybe I forgot to mention something, maybe you want to see me do another one of these videos, drop it in the comments section. I would love to hear what content you want to see from me and any thoughts that you might have. Anyways, that's going to be all for this video, so until next time, peace.